You are 8 miles from the trailhead. It has been raining for 3 solid hours, and the temperature is dropping fast. Your boots are soaked, your base layer is damp, and the shivering has already started. That involuntary shivering tells you your core temperature is heading in the wrong direction. Right now, the most important thing you can do is build a fire. Not later, not when it stops raining. Now, because wet and cold together are the combination that kills people in the backcountry. Accidental hypothermia causes at least 1,500 deaths a year in the United States alone, and wet conditions combined with wind are among the leading contributors. Your body loses heat roughly 25 times faster in wet clothing than in dry. Fire is not optional. Fire is medicine. Here is the problem. Everything around you looks soaked. The ground is saturated. Fallen branches are sitting in puddles. Every surface you touch feels cold and slick with moisture. And that voice in your head says it cannot be done. Ignore that voice. A fire can absolutely be built when everything is wet, and you do not need exotic tricks to do it. What you need is an understanding of where dry material hides, how to process it, and how to structure your fire so it works with you instead of against you. The first thing to understand is why wet wood will not burn. Fire requires 3 elements: heat, fuel, and oxygen. When wood is saturated, all the heat energy you introduce gets absorbed by the water trapped inside the fibers. Instead of raising the wood to its combustion temperature, your heat source is just boiling off moisture. That is why wet wood hisses and smokes, but refuses to produce flame. Your entire strategy in wet conditions comes down to one principle: find or create dry fuel and protect it long enough for the fire to sustain itself. Start by looking up, not down. Wood lying on the ground has been soaking up moisture like a sponge. But dead branches still attached to standing trees tell a different story. Rain hits them, sure, but the water runs off quickly because the wood is elevated and exposed to air. The inner wood on these branches often stays surprisingly dry, even after days of rain. Snap a dead branch off a tree trunk and listen. If it breaks with a clean, sharp crack, you have found dry wood. If it bends like rubber or breaks with a dull, fibrous tear, it is too wet or too green. Keep looking. Focus on the dead lower limbs of conifers like pine, spruce, or fir, because the living canopy above acts as a natural umbrella, shielding those dead branches from the worst of the rain. Now that you have found standing dead wood, you need to process it. Even if the surface feels damp, the interior is almost certainly dry. This is where a fixed blade knife becomes essential. Use a technique called batoning. Place the blade across the end of a section of wood, then strike the spine of the knife with a heavy stick to drive it through and split the piece in half. Then split it again. Each split exposes more dry inner wood. You can keep splitting until you have pencil-thin strips of dry kindling that came from the protected heart of the original piece. No hatchet required. Just a solid knife and a thick stick for a mallet. While you are processing your kindling, keep your eyes open for natural tinder sources that resist moisture. Birch bark is one of nature's finest fire starters. It contains a compound called bitumen, a natural oil that makes the bark water-resistant and highly flammable. Even damp birch bark will ignite with a spark. If you see a birch tree with bark peeling away naturally, or find bark on the ground that has shed from a dead tree, grab it. Scrape the inner side with your knife to create fine shavings, and those shavings will catch a spark readily. Another outstanding natural resource is fatwood. When a pine tree dies, the resin inside concentrates in the heartwood, especially at the stump and where branches meet the trunk. This resin-saturated wood is practically waterproof, and the terpene compounds inside are extremely flammable. A fist-sized chunk of fatwood can be shaved into curls that will catch fire from a single spark, even in a downpour. Look for old pine stumps that have gone gray and rotten on the outside. The hard, amber-colored core that smells powerfully of turpentine is pure fatwood. Hardened tree resin itself, the crusty amber yellow blobs you find on wounded pines and spruces, also burns well and can extend the life of your initial flame. If you cannot find birch bark or fatwood, make feather sticks. Take one of your dry split sticks, about 6 to 10 inches long, and use your knife to shave thin curls down the length of the wood without detaching them. The result looks like a wooden feather, with dozens of paper-thin curls still attached. These curls catch flame easily because of their extreme thinness, and because they remain connected to the stick, wind cannot scatter them the way it would a pile of loose shavings. Make at least 3 or 4 feather sticks before you attempt to light anything. In wet conditions, patience during preparation is what separates a warm night from a miserable one. Before you ever enter the backcountry, prepare emergency tinder at home. Cotton balls worked with petroleum jelly are among the most reliable fire starters you can carry. A single treated cotton ball weighs almost nothing, takes a spark from a ferrocerium rod, and burns with a strong flame for 3 to 5 minutes. That is enough sustained heat to dry and ignite damp kindling above it. A ferrocerium rod, often called a ferro rod, produces sparks that reach temperatures above 5,400 degrees Fahrenheit. Unlike matches, a ferro rod works when wet. You wipe it dry, strike it, and get a shower of white-hot sparks. Carry both in a waterproof bag, and you have a fire-starting system that simply does not fail. When you are ready to build, do not set your fire directly on the wet ground. Lay down a platform of wrist-thick sticks side by side, like a small raft. This elevates your fire above the moisture and creates airflow underneath. On top of this platform, place your tinder, whether that is petroleum jelly, cotton balls, birch bark shavings, or feather sticks. Around the tinder, lean your thinnest, driest kindling into a cone shape, a teepee structure roughly a foot tall. This design channels heat upward through the kindling, drying each piece as the flames climb. Add progressively larger pieces as the fire grows. Do not rush it. Do not pile on wet wood and hope for the best. Feed the fire gradually, letting it build strength. Once you have a solid bed of coals, the fire becomes self-sustaining and remarkably resilient. At that point, you can start placing damp wood in a ring around the fire to pre-dry it before adding it as fuel. The radiated heat drives the moisture out, and within 20 to 30 minutes, that wood will be ready to burn. Every one of these techniques is something an average person can learn and practice on a rainy afternoon. And that is exactly what you should do, because the worst time to learn firecraft is when your life depends on it. If this was valuable, consider subscribing so you do not miss what comes next. Stay safe out there and stay warm.